The day before Mother's Day, I got some pretty devastating news. I'd shared last week and a couple weeks ago in this podcast about my close family friend and how his fiance is pregnant with their baby. And it turns out that the day before Mother's Day, I found out that they had miscarried. And it made me really sad. And I just wanted to take this opportunity and share what was going through my mind, my heart over the weekend in hopes that it will help someone listening on the other end of this podcast. Life is always giving us opportunities to come back to our heart and come back to love ourselves. And when those things are happening, those moments that feel like they're beyond despair, when it feels like life is really hard, it is our go-to, I think, on a human level to want to protect, defend, control, make things happen. And as a previous type A control freak, which I absolutely was, my old go-to was to take things into my hand and try to make shit happen. And I'm here to tell you, it doesn't work. And not only that, it leaves you beyond exhausted. It just is awful to live in that space of constant push, constant resistance, where you're always sort of going against the grain, always moving that boulder uphill. And I'm here to tell you there's a different way to live your life. And I just wanted to take an opportunity to share my perspective and my journey. When it came to pregnancy, I didn't have an easy time getting pregnant. I was 29 years old when we first started trying, and I'd been married since the age of 23, and it was really weird. I went from a stage of completely being okay not having children to holding my friend's newborn in my arms for the first time, little boy. Well, I fell absolutely in love with him and wanted nothing more after that moment when I was 29 to get pregnant. My ex and I were living in Florida. We ended up moving to Dubai, where we lived for the next year and a half. His work had taken us there. And I found myself over the next year and a half going through every possible way to try to conceive. I'd gone through Clomid pills, injections. Any woman that's gone through infertility is knowing what I'm talking about, and just basically being shot up with hormones for the next year and a half to find out that we didn't get pregnant, to just have one failed pregnancy test, one menstrual cycle after the other, kind of reinforcing my belief that I was a failure, that I was something was wrong with me, and that God had forgotten about me. And these were the interpretations I had at the time. Well, towards the end of our time in Dubai, we ended up meeting a doctor, an Indian doctor, and I was going through acupuncture and all these things to try to control my hormones, to control my body, essentially, while I was taking these hormonal medications. And after going through several questionnaires, several tests, etc., our doctor asked about family history. At which point it was brought to surface that my ex-husband and I both had a gene for a bone marrow deficiency, essentially, that literally in my ex-husband's case, I believe 6 or 7 of his father's siblings had died, literally 2 of them were alive. And it resulted in high infant mortality, all these crazy things, not to mention a lower quality of life if you had this disease. And I was just like, oh my God, we both were carriers. We both had a recessive trait, and which means that none of the symptoms, none of those health conditions showed up for us. But essentially, long story short, in our case, each of our children would end up having a 25% chance of actually having this disorder. And if we didn't go through proper genetic testing, basically we were leaving all of these to chance, and we may have children that may die at a very early age. And so the reason I'm sharing this story is because sometimes in those moments, it feels like life is against you. It feels like you have no power. It feels like you are completely powerless, which, by the way, we are. But it feels like, oh my God, something's wrong with this situation. And what ended up happening for us is when we ended up coming back to the US after that time in Dubai, we ended up finding an amazing doctor, went through what's called pre-genetic testing, and my twins ended up being the product of a really healthy pregnancy. And it was right place, right time. Stress levels were normalized. I was back in America, back in with good hospitals, all the things. And so kind of going into the weekend, the start of the Mother's Day weekend, to find out that news really hit my heart really hard. And in that moment, I was really sad. extremely sad because, after having taken time to like process the news, I was really excited to see that child come into the world and be a part of that child's journey, to find out that the child is no longer meant to come into this world at this time. And, it's so amazing because in those moments where things feel hard, we have two options. One is we can try to control the outcome and try to push harder. And I know in my case in Dubai, every negative pregnancy test was like reinforcement to like try to go get the next pill, the next thing, a higher dosage of hormones, the next thing. And it just became this losing battle that I could not get my arms around. It became this thing. And with each quote unquote failure, right? With each negative pregnancy test, with each menstrual cycle, it was like, oh my God, something's wrong with me, and further like became a source of invalidation because that's where my perspective was at that time. The other alternative, and in this wisdom that I have today, nearly 15 years later, I can tell you there's a different plan, that it's all working out, that God has something better for us than we could possibly have for ourselves. And when things are happening and they feel really hard, or you feel devastated or powerless or whatever, what I found to help me is really allowing myself to surrender to God's plan, to give it to God. One of the things that I learned in Al-Anon when I was struggling with active alcoholism is I would imagine taking that thing that I was trying to control, and that in my case it was alcoholism, the alcoholic, and I would wrap that alcoholic in my mind's eye in a warm blanket, and I would gently give it to the palms of God and say, okay, God, you've got this. And when it came to trying to have babies, surrendering that child, those children, to God and saying, okay, like God, your plan, your timeline, not mine. The more I've let go in things, the more peace I've had with things. And it's so remarkable because, it's about coming to appreciate yourself. So on one lens, my old egoic ways, every time something would not go according to my plan, I would invalidate myself. I see this in sales and entrepreneurship. Every time I would get a sale, be like, okay, what's wrong with me? What did I do wrong? And then you go down this rabbit hole of like trying to figure out what you did wrong and listen to your sales calls and beat yourself up and go through the thing. And obviously there's value in learning and becoming better at cultivating that skill set. But sometimes there's this recognition that you can't miss what's meant for you. So when I look at the sales that I've had, like the easiest sales, there's been no push. There's been no, trying to convince them. There's been no, let me manipulate them with my words and use my NLP on them. No, either it's a hell yes fit with a hell yes client or it's not. And what's crazy is, the clients that have come in kicking and screaming with resistance have had resistance the whole time. Whereas the clients that are like, okay, Karishma, okay, let's do this. Here's my credit card. No resistance, no pushback, are the clients that are like all in energetically, and they end up receiving the breadth and depth of everything that we're trying to explore together because they're showing up with like heart wide open and they're ready to go all in and really take the gifts, take the wisdom and apply it to their own lives. And so, in my journey with entrepreneurship, I can tell you, you can't miss what's meant for you. And we have two options with everything. Option A is we can invalidate ourselves and say, oh my God, what's wrong with me? Or option B, we can say, oh my God, thank you. Thank you, God, because I can't miss what's meant for me. And then the other thing I want to share today is rejection is protection. Rejection is protection. So again, having served, hundreds of clients and having gone through nearly 500 sales calls the last 5 years, I've had some clients that have felt like they're the perfect client and they're ready for it and they're ready to go all in. And then something holds them back and they end up not buying coaching, not signing up for coaching. And turns out that they're not the right fit. Whether it's some content they're posting on social media or something else, there's something just not quite right. And sometimes it's really obvious and sometimes it's not obvious. But this is where we get to trust the process and focus on ourselves. Because what I can control is my reaction. What I can control is how I show up. What I can control is the meaning of things. Wayne Dyer said, change the way you look at things and the things that you look at change. But if I'm able to look at things for what they are, able to take myself out of it and have this detached view, am I able to see myself as an observer and just see it for what it is? There's so much more that is happening that I can't even access in that moment when I'm raw, when I'm vulnerable, when I'm, have the projections going on, when my mind is spinning and things just feel completely awry. And when I look at this couple that's in my life, I can tell you it's those greatest moments of despair. In my case, it was through alcoholism. In my case, it was even the devastation of living through all that. Even, those moments, the greatest moments of surrender when it came to having babies. Every moment that felt like it was the greatest, most devastating moment actually turned out to be the greatest gifts. But what's really important here is recognizing that when things aren't going according to plan, you didn't do anything wrong. There's nothing wrong with you. Maybe the whole point of all of this is to come back to your heart. Maybe the whole point of all of this is to not make yourself wrong because you're not getting pregnant, because your husband isn't doing the things that he needs to. Maybe it's because no matter what you try, your bank balance won't go up, or all of these things. There's so many things that we have no control over. But maybe the whole purpose of all of this, especially when things don't feel right, don't feel good, is to be okay with yourself. Maybe that's the whole point, to find that love and compassion within your heart, to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, you know what? I know I feel like a failure sometimes, but there's really nothing wrong with me, and that I can't miss what's meant for me. And that God's got my back, and there's something in this great planet. It's all working out on God's timing, not mine. And the more I surrender my agenda, what I want, all of these frivolous things that I've fantasized to be how things are, maybe it's about none of that, but it's really about surrendering to God's plan. And to find peace in my heart with myself, like, oh my God, Karishma, you're doing so much and you can't control this thing, and it's okay. And can I possibly give it to God? Can I find peace in this situation? Can I trust it's all working out? That this magic that I desire is all unfolding, not in my timeline, but according to God's plan. And maybe that's the whole point of it. And I can tell you that now. I didn't have that wisdom years ago. And anytime I didn't have sales, I would make myself wrong. Anytime things didn't go according to plan, I would make myself wrong. Anytime I wouldn't have control over my husband, I would make myself wrong. Anytime my kids would have a tantrum in the grocery store, I would make myself wrong. But what if I looked at all of it and say, okay, my husband's my husband. My kids are being my kids. I have zero control over anybody. Maybe the whole point is just to focus on me, and to love me, and to give myself grace, and to surrender the magic of everything to God. Maybe that's the whole point of everything. And this wisdom I'm sharing with you all today, it saved me during COVID, when the world was freaking out and panicking. And, all you saw when you looked at the news was the death rate, the death toll increasing by the thousands each day, and all the drama that surrounded all of it. In those moments, I think we realized how utterly powerless we were. But instead of focusing on that, on something outside of me, letting that news derail my entire existence, it taught me to take control back of myself, to focus on what I had control over, which was how I showed up, what I showed up for, being present for myself, being present for my kids, and saying thank you to God for all of it. Every day is a gift, and it's all perfectly unfolding. And those moments that feel really hard, for those of you that are struggling, know that God has a beautiful plan for you, that you haven't done anything wrong. You're exactly where you're meant to be. God's got your back, but now it's time to let go and let Him take care of you. Let angels take care of you. And I know in those moments of my greatest despair, I found angels, people that have helped me, supported me, guided me, and helped me get through some of the darkest, heaviest times. So just be okay, trust in yourself, trust in God, and give it all to God. And you'll find so much more love, so much more calm, so much more peace in your heart than anyone else. I hope you found that helpful. Have a beautiful week. We'll connect soon. Bye.